As you see, I have failed to come up with a title. I always try. It's not a thing I'm good at. Nevertheless, these are the things I want to talk about. What is the idea of the future? The galvanizing idea, the idea to which hope attaches. What is the name of the dream? Is there a dream? Has the future, just because of where we see it going, lost all promise? For instance, 19th and 20th century materialists, but everybody really, had the idea of progress. But progress just now is looking like a passé notion. Is there for us any electric idea of the future? This is my main question. Fathers and Children is the title of a 19th century novel by the Russian writer Turgenev. And that novel does have a bearing on what I will discuss, in that the children in Turgenev's novel were modern people with new views. But my title really refers to a parable of Jesus. When you see Father here, think our Father, and seeing the plural fathers, include human fathers as authority figures. What I mean by the others is the people we usually refer to as the them. Who is responsible for the disintegrated condition of 21st century education mentioned in the description of this conference? They did this, or so we tend to say. Also, I'm going to speak for, I estimate, exactly 2 hours. And I do genuinely apologize for that. I am sorry to make you listen for so long. But I will have to rely on your ability to handle it as Augustine College alumni, as I simply don't have the ability to write for easy consumption. Still, I hope the time may not drag, in that you'll be hearing something new, something that I believe no one is telling you. And just so you don't have to wonder what I'm going to say, I'm trying to cure my habit of indirectness. I'm going to take about 20 minutes to lay it out in a general way. In 1953, a French cardinal wrote, "Our world is now in the throes of such a cultural crisis as previous history hardly records. The old world of the bourgeois is in collapse, with all its categories of civilized life and behavior. This is something neither to be applauded nor deplored, but we are witnessing the last convulsions of a dying world, a dying culture. And everything about the church that intrinsically belongs to this particular culture dies with it. What is passing is not Christianity itself, but the particular embodiment of Christianity in a given social organization." I want to speak to you about us, Christians, in this era of what Jean Danielou called a dying culture. In the post-Christian age, which is what 1 year later, C.S. Lewis called our time. Note that these assessments were made in the 1950s. If, writes Danielou, we have been content to think of civilization as meaning Western civilization, which we have molded into Christian patterns, we now have to recognize the existence and vitality of other civilizations which are not Christian. We are living in such a civilization now. You may deny it the right to be called that, arguing that there is only one civilization, but on that point, Danielou contradicts you, I think rightly. Indeed, I think he might say that the tendency to unite Christianity with a given social organization, the way of life of a specific culture, is to court a very dangerous error. When the means in the end become to a person identified, that person is now prone to serve the means, the civilization, as the end, because the two are now one. But the moment what is merely a means is treated that way, it is no longer a means. And the most important thing about it has been forgotten, its servant role. Everything that is a means takes us to something beyond it, but when it is confused with that beyond, what is the biblical term for that? When the thing that announces the ultimate begins to function as the ultimate. Let's move away from this abstraction to an historical fact. We must permit ourselves to see that a second Western civilization has arisen, one that has replaced what we have been in the habit of calling Western civilization, which was a Christian civilization. We have to see it in exactly this way, as a replacement civilization, which is explained by the way it arose, by a kind of negation. I've mentioned the West. It's not actually terminology I prefer, but to save time, let's not even raise the issue of the Christian East. Since our focus tends to be, as a default, where we live, I'm just going to fasten on the West. In the Christian civilization and in the pagan civilization that came before it, an order had been recognized that set limits on man that must not be denied. Human beings must understand who they are, participants in this order, given a role in it that they do not define. You must know your place and not begin to think that you can defy this order. That was the great ancient sin of hubris. The new civilization disbelieves in all this, down to the very root. There's nothing there in the universe that could give man a role, a place, a law. Where pagans and Christians saw an order directing them, the new person sees nothing. There is nothing there. Where traditionalists think there is a divine order, a spirit world, a natural law, right and wrong written into the fabric of things, this person, who can in this way be called the nihilist, says there's nothing like that in the universe. We put those things there: laws, duties, essences, gods, and we can change them. Lewis's Tao is a human invention. Invention delivers morality. And so there is a moral order at our discretion. There's nothing outside people telling them how to live. There is nothing with authority over people. People make judgments about what to call good, and it is they in a society, in a civilization, who decide, in fact, the very criteria of that judgment of good. Because the civilization now around us came about in this way, by this verdict of nothing there. In the past, people believed in a moral order, a spirit world, a soul, but modern people do not believe. There's simply nothing there of that kind. Because of this, it can be called a nihilistic civilization. But this tells you only what it does not believe in. What it does believe in is the autonomy of the human will, the will directing itself for its own reasons. It is a human society that decides in some way what is good. From my standpoint, there's plenty to wonder about how that deciding is done, but this is what the formative agencies of the present world appear to believe, and people are not disagreeing by asking for deeper justifications. And when I say that human beings decide what is good, I don't mean determine what conforms to the moral order. I mean they invent it, they choose what they choose, they express their own values. None of this is news to you. We've been living in this society on replaced new foundations for so long now that it is an embarrassment to be expressing shock at the unprecedented things that exactly this worldview promises to generate. To object, it's against nature, it's against all history. To express shock at what is happening is to suggest that you believe this new world was somehow not going to be allowed, that there is something somewhere that would kick in and stop people from having such beliefs. Were you to say, for instance, common sense, This would express trust in an enlightenment, not biblical conception of human behavior. The morality of the present, in which each person determines his or her own morals, is in human history the morality most tailored to encourage people's ordinary moral inclinations. It was bound to be acceptable. With that scenery in place, allow me to shift to the themes named in the title of the conference. Learning, living, and leading as Christians. And connect this with what I've been saying. The things listed here are very hard to get right if we are blind to where in history we are. In fact, it is almost inevitable that we will deform ourselves by the way we go about these very things if we do not see where in history we are. And here are the three things that I propose to say. It is apparent to all of us that the society we live in has a non-Christian character. In 1954, on a TV show that I remember watching, it began as a radio show in 1949 and ran till 1960 when the kids in the family that the show was following went into the army and got married. That stretch of time shows you that it was popular. In 1954, the TV family would pray over Thanksgiving burgers, and this was thought completely average. This was normal mainstream behavior in my lifetime. You cannot, however, I caution you, take mass media as a window onto the reality of the actual culture. But still, we're very far from that world now. That age is over. Here then is my first claim. Whatever we think about that past world, which we might call Western Christianity, there was a serious defect in it, which, combined with the wayward forces of ordinary human life, brought down what is called Western civilization, ended that Christian governance of things or Christian normalcy, in fact, overturned it. Today, some people say we are in almost opposite conditions to normal mainstream Christianity. Danielou writes, the emergence of new social patterns does not mean that the old patterns were not right in their day, but only that they are no longer right. Modern Christians, in their participation in and response to the disintegration that I've just sketched, have made a mistake. And it is one that we are showing signs of not rejecting, but embracing in the 21st century. But we've got to correct this mistake, not double down on it. It is hard for a Christian to see the end of what Lewis called the Christian age as anything but a catastrophe. But consider the possibility that it is an event in a certain way brought about by Christianity being faithful, being truly what it is, an event that has made it possible to free Christians from what had accidentally turned into a defect in Christian civilization. Suppose that the collapse is the optimal situation to rid us of what turned out to be, quite ironically, hubris, not knowing your place. Quite particularly, the flesh confusing itself with the divine. Danielou makes a rather interesting point about the collapse of cultures. The history of civilization does not conform to a law of evolutionary progress. It is to be regarded as a series of kairoi, moments of decision, crises, each representing at once the breakup and the condemnation of a society that has committed the sin of hubris. Hubris is for a Christian the same thing it is for everyone else, not knowing your place, confusing ourselves with what we are most definitely not. Isn't this that issue we touched on, the means and the end blurred together into one? Then Danielou adds that each such collapse consists also in, or brings in its wake, a parallel renewal of the church through purgation. It is this renewal that I'm talking about, though I am in no position to talk as he does about a renewal of the church, all I mean is a renewed understanding, a sense of ourselves purged of its mistake. What is, in fact, historically great about the age we are now in? And notice that that is a claim I am making. What is historically great about this rotten age? So it's perhaps not so rotten, or is perhaps helpful in its rottenness, is that we can now see our mistake, though I grant you the opportunity to point instead at the shocking acts of vandalism perpetrated by the barbarian culture is working quite beautifully against our seeing any such thing. What mistake do I mean? Christians have failed to see throughout the age that got us to where we now are, that to be a Christian is most emphatically not, election to the role of leader. Leading as Christians, you cannot be further off the mark. We have been shown now by history what we were so long ago warned of, which is that the role of leader is a temptation offered to weaken and subvert us and remove us from power. I'm not against Christian politics. I recently wrote a long series of articles on this painting, which laid out for medieval Siena the biblical principles of Christian government. But governing in the Christian world is one thing, and concordia, which is a condition of just government, has long since vanished from our world. In fact, Christianity was a contributor to its loss, but enough said about this. My point is that the idea of Christians as leaders in a post-Christian world winds up working counter to the Christian idea of politics. That is, how could putting Christian leaders in charge of a post-Christian world be Christian rule, when this would mean that the very conditions that a specifically Christian politics had argued were essential are missing, unavailable? For instance, as I noted, the notion of concordia, a basic commonality of outlook that brings people together, what Oliver O'Donovan, after Augustine, has called common objects of love. The Sienese said that this is what made just acts of government possible. The injustice we see all the time in our world is an effect of not having it. What kind of monstrosity is an unjust Christian government? It is all laid out in this painting by Lorenzetti. I won't say more. So the idea that Christians can lead, that Christian leadership is attained simply in governance by educated Christians, those other conditions being missing, turns out to be a quite unchristian thought. This kind of thinking is just a temptation, and it bears bad fruit, as it did when Christians led while creating the modern world, a Western phenomenon. Could it have been that leaders, in dealing with those whom those leaders were leading, triggered a kind of mass exodus back to Egypt, as it were? That is, under that sort of Christian leadership, conditions of slavery in Egypt began to look more like freedom to many of those being led. That is, could a Christian leader make the goods of an anti-Christian culture look far more congenial to an ordinary person than those of a Christian culture? In leadership, success might be denied by getting power and having your way. So today, would it really be wise to try to go back, to attempt to take back our culture? I realize that this is old footage.
My friends, we must take back our cities and take back our culture and take back our country. God bless you and God bless America.
But what is the status of this idea, or rather this dream? Does it look passé? What is the idea of the future? What do we dream of historically? Is it that the age of dreams is over? Everything is too far gone? Or if dreaming is never passé, what is the dream? Is it to take back our culture? I'm asking here, what is the dream now? Let me repeat, I hope more clearly, what I'm suggesting. Christians, not conservatives, but Christians, are in a beautiful position, at last, in the present century, now that Christian leadership has collapsed, to notice our mistake. Our mistake. We have thought that to be a Christian is to be a leader. We have fallen by virtue of being in charge for the delusion of leadership. But now we can wake up and see what Christianity really is. It is an important lesson that, of course, we believe we have already fully learned. But what I'm suggesting is that this lesson has been largely kept from us, obscured by the former success of a civilization, by a culture and its dream. If the impression is growing that I am one of those Christians who is receptive to lectures from people about how Jesus would have wanted you to hand power over, nothing could be further from the truth. I believe in power, which is not a dirty word. The power of my power. God is power. The issue is never power, yes or no. It is power over what? God says, get power over yourself. My first claim is that in being in the post-Christian age, we are uniquely positioned to understand ourselves. The obscuring success is gone. We can see more clearly who we are. My second claim is that getting this misconception concerning our role, our status, out of our way opens us up beautifully to a renewal of actual Christian life, not worldly distraction. And central to Christian life, absolutely central, is Christian education. And you must add to that, not the kind that is distorted by the mistake. These two steps, to understand the mistake and to correct it in the way I wish to propose, speaking of education, these will be the two parts of my principal argument. To take these steps is to be Christians more properly. But there's one thing more. At the center of this present age is the other, the person invested in this world we are in. That change in our thinking that I just mentioned will have the effect of transforming our relationship to this person, whom we are in the habit of calling the enemy, the barbarian, them. Transforming that relationship is crucial to being a Christian. It is our present sense of this relationship that is a major contributor to our deformation. That is the third part of what I've thought to say to you. The Christian mission is not simply to teach the word to individuals of all countries. It is to evangelize the civilizations. Jesus wanted people to come into the kingdom, change our thinking about these two things, leadership and education. And evangelism acquires an entirely different appearance. That is, the bad dream of culture war evangelism will be over. What is culture war evangelism? It is conquest evangelism, taking back what was taken away, like the Crusader. It is the immiseration of the enemy, drinking leftist tears. It is Pharisaic evangelism, driven by the Pharisees' kind of love. All that matters is what is right, what is good for you. Logically, one might find that claim pretty formidable, that all that matters is what is right. What, however, is left unsaid here is the claim that necessarily accompanies it. And I know what is right. I've thought it all through, omitting nothing. All that needs doing is what I want. That is less logically formidable. Finally, it is evangelism with that condemnatory note, denouncing evil, naming enemies. One morning while I was writing this address, this email arrived announcing the graduation ceremony of another Christian college. Be a threat to God's enemies. Enemies, that condemnatory note. We are the Christ-like, you are the demonic. This may not be sounded anywhere in your evangelism, but the message has been delivered by Christian culture loud and clear. Christians, Christianity itself, God as the censorious parent harping endlessly on the horrible mistakes that the culture is making, is at the forefront of our relationship with the non-Christian. But why should that be? It is as if the most important thing is denouncing what is happening. It's not that the horrible is not being done. And I too am talking about a mistake. Mistakes require correction. But is there not something more to emphasized by Jesus, that is in fact even more worthy of our attention, because it is more fundamentally expressive of who God is? The mindset that attaches to leadership is a picture of the leader over against those needing to be led, the wayward. We look out on society and think, all you lost people. One of the most disliked devices of the Christian Middle Ages is the division of the condemned and the saved that we see on Gothic cathedrals. Though it portrays language in Matthew 25 related to the Last Judgment, it is, among Christians in our day, the medieval imagery thought most deservedly forgotten. Yet this dividing, not the punishment aspect, but the division itself, tends to dominate in our vision of contemporary society. It is us and them, pagans, barbarians. And let me ask you something about this. What, in your view, is God's plan for these people? And what term do you use for them today? Is it the damned? That's the term that goes with the medieval portals, which some of my students have told me they dismiss. If I ask, what is God's plan for the unbeliever, or whatever term you choose, is that plan written down? Is it in the Bible? Some will simply answer, the plan is hell. Yes, it's in the Bible. I don't disagree, except to add that it is explained in the Bible also what the desire of God is, not the plan, but the wish. And if the all-powerful God wishes, in 1 Timothy 2, we are reminded of God, our Savior, who desires all people to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. We think of the Bible as God's plan for mankind, but the Bible is what the barbarians reject. Does God have a plan to bring them from the wilderness they are in into the fold, into the church? What is that plan? In the parable of the prodigal son, that son is the rejecter of the Father, the tradition, the Bible. I've called him the first nihilist. He is, in the parable, a child of the Father, who are the children of God. So the third part, the closing part of my remarks, concerns the way in which we see the world we are in, the post-Christian world, and the people in it who are not like us, who reject what we usually have to say or what they expect us to say. When people look at us, they do not see Jesus. And sadly, it might be that when they look at us, they believe they are seeing Jesus and want nothing to do with him. But Jesus is supposed to be visible in us. Isn't that so? That isn't happening. And my argument will be that it is not happening because of history, because Western Christianity has been caught in a trap of leadership from which we are now being helped to escape, if we notice. This is the point of my remarks. History has smashed our power trap, and it is time for Christians to walk out of it. If we do that and take the path we are being shown, which is our path, Jesus will emerge for the people that we live among. If we take this path, the gospel will stop being the weird Christian-y message that we have turned it into, something few people want to hear about, and be again what it is, the gospel, good news, that ordinary human beings, creatures made in God's image, can hear the good in. Those then are my three claims: a mistaken way of thinking linked with leadership, escape from it, and the new relation to others that permits. I've already implied this, but perhaps it's worth just stating that there are two levels on which this trouble can be seen. Despite how I have presented it, it is actually most fundamentally interpersonal trouble. You can see this misguided dynamic arise between a father and his child in an individual family. And it is notable that we do not see that dynamic in the parable that I've mentioned. There, something entirely different is underway. It can play out between individuals, between parent and child, teacher and student, master and apprentice, the authority and the one under authority. But the trouble can be scaled up and replicated on the societal level, where the authority figure is not a figure, but the governors and heads and institutions of society. I hope in the third part to get to this interpersonal trouble, and my lecture is long because to do that, I first have to convince you that there is a mistake in the West's understanding of leading, of authority. And I cannot do that in a few words. So you can see that we are talking about learning, living, and leading as Christians. And let's not fail to start with learning. In that effort, we cannot do better than to examine, to learn about leading.